All right, everybody, we're back. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. I wasn't going to do a show, but, well, this is what I do. So, I'm recording this on Saturday. I think today's Saturday. It is. I'm recording this on Saturday the 30th. I'll air it on Sunday morning. So, happy Sunday morning. Happy Easter. Happy Easter. So we're just going to hop right back into this. We're going to continue on these Sergio Arcacha papers. Again, I'll reiterate my opinion that Garrison's papers are grossly inadequate. Like, disgustingly inadequate. I believe that 80 to 90% of them are actually missing. We have never seen 80 to 90% of his papers. And I believe that there's a whole lot more on Sergio Arcacha that we don't have access to. So we'll wrap up this file in the next couple days. And then, remember, I'm just putting off jumping back to the Lauren Hall stuff, because then we're going to be on that for like 2 weeks, and I'm dreading it. So we're gonna see what we can get through on Sergio Arcacha in the next couple days before we get back to that Lauren Hall stuff. So here we go. Office of the District Attorney, State of Louisiana, Orleans Parish, April 18th, 1967. Statement of David F. Gentry, 922 Dumaine Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. Reference Gentry. This is a handwritten note. It says, friend of Shaw's living at 4907 Magazine from 61 to 64. And then 2, Leighton Martin's and 4900 block of Magazine Street. Interesting, huh? Right around where Oswald and Clay Shaw was living and all this stuff, right? All these guys just so happen to live right next to each other. Interrogated by officers Kent Sims and Clancy Navarre in reference to Dr. Mary Sherman and a special investigation. Dr. Sherman came in the shop, I would say, occasionally, not frequently, but I can look up on the ledger and see. She never made any extensive or large purchases. I was never in her apartment. If she ever came to the shop with anyone, it was possibly with someone who lived in the same apartment complex in which she lived. Probably the entire time she lived at 3101 St. Charles Avenue, she came in the shop, and she was in the shop the late afternoon before she was murdered. I do not know any of her friends. I don't recall my first meeting with Clay Shaw. However, it was probably in 58 or 59. The original interest in meeting was through business at the International Trade Mart and the possibility of purchasing and restoring View Car property myself. I am a designer of interiors and interior furnishings, and I am also director of the Oriental Gallery at the 20th Century Shop. One other person that I do know through the International Trade Mart and Clay Shaw is J.B. Donhauer, but only through the Trade Mart and through Clay Shaw do I know J.B. I moved to 4919 Magazine Street in February of 1961. I don't recall or don't know the date that Oswald moved into 4907 Magazine Street. I never had occasion to speak to him, Oswald, but passed him on several occasions going to Rex Laundry and Dry Cleaners. I don't recall ever seeing him untidy or with a beard. Then on December 15th of 1964, I moved back to the quarter. The Sunday before Mardi Gras of 1965, Clay Shaw attended a buffet party that afternoon in my apartment at 619 Governor Nichols. After moving back to the quarter, I did see Clay passing on the street or once in a while at the coffee shop restaurant on St. Peter next to Pat O'Brien's. I can't recall the number of times that I have. Not that frequently, but there have been times that I have been in Clay's apartment for drinks. It was at 1313 or 1331 Dauphine. I'm not sure. The first few times it was just for drinks. The gatherings that would have been termed a party, if I recall correctly, was in October of 66 on a Sunday afternoon. As I say, there was a gentleman there that was Spanish or Cuban or Latin. He could have even been Mexican as far as that goes. He was about 53 years, 6'2" almost, but not as tall as Clay. He weighed about 175 pounds, ruddy complexion, and I think he did have a mustache. If I recall correctly, he had rather full head of hair with some gray, which he parted. I am Pretty sure his hair was parted. He had no scars. He had a Spanish accent. There was also a younger person that had painted Clay's apartment, and he was to do some work for this gentleman. He was doing painting for these people and was supposedly an artist or writer. Clay's apartment had just been completed being painted. This young man had painted the apartment for Clay and was to do some work for the older man. This younger person was in his early 20s. There were some 8 to 12 people at this party, but I can't recall their names. Do you know any of these people personally? I know several of them, just a hello acquaintance, not personally. There were some whose names I knew, but I can't recall. Did the name Sergio ring a bell? It could have been this person I'm describing at this party, but I'm not positive. I show you a picture of Sergio Arcacha Smith. Could this be the fellow you described as a Spanish-type individual at the party? No, because he is much more lean than the person in this picture and older. In other words, his face was lean as yours. And if I recall correctly, the hair was longer and more full than that. Clay knew a lot of Spanish and Mexican people. Didn't seem unusual for them to be there. He knew them from the quarter, from the Trade Mart, and from Mexico. After the party, I went to another party around 7 o'clock. I went to Clay's around 5 and left around 7. I think this was in October. Being at 2 parties the same evening, it is hard to remember who was there. Shown picture of Spanish and other people and referring to Alvin Bobouf. This could have been the person who painted Clay's apartment and was to do some work for the Spanish person. Firsthand, I know nothing of Clay's personal or sexual life, but maybe he has made some remark of someone he has met, that he has thought the person was very attractive or something like that. I can't recall him saying he ever went to bed with some person, but he did mention to me his liking of men. It is relatively common knowledge among friends. I know nothing firsthand of his private life, but he did say something about liking men. He never mentioned anyone specifically. Let me see that picture again, the one I saw before. This person I know, Jerry Winters, is that his name? And then Garrison asks, are you a homosexual? And he says, I would rather be termed bisexual. I've had sex with both sexes. I was married for 5.5 years. I had 2 children. I have had sex with women before I married, and since then. I show you a picture of a single person dressed in a sailor outfit. Can you identify this person? It appears to be a person I know as Jerry Winters, who worked for Nunez Employment Agency about 3 years ago, I think. He lives or did live on Josephine Street or somewhere up in that area. I know nothing about him personally. Do you ever recall Clay Shaw having a roommate? I think many years ago a Jeff Bitterson lived with him. I think this was many years ago. I am not sure. I think that he is gay. Do you know what type of work Jeff Bitterson did? As far as I know, he always sold real estate. He worked for Marilyn Tate. I know because Margie O'Dare, who works in the office, is a good friend of mine. The handwritten note here says, note to persons identified below by Gentry. The Jirachi they were arrested with is a something, I can't read that word, something dead Addy from, I can't read this at all, something Jirachi. We're talking about Philip Jirachi. And there's a whole family of Jirachis who seem to be involved in some weird shit. We'll get to this one day. I skimmed through some of this stuff recently, and it seems very fucking irrelevant. It just goes to show certain associations, and Philip Jirachi III allegedly associated with Oswald, but then you had Philip Jirachi II, his father, get busted in some weird gay party thing, and there was a bunch of people at that party who got arrested who were connected to David Ferry and these guys, and then Philip Jirachi Sr., the old Jirachi, he's in this mix somehow too, but it's one of those real tangent things that ultimately has very little bearing on the assassination. It says is from the Jirachi who had an association with Carlos Brenier and met Oswald at Brenier's place. Some question is the Jirachi referred to related to Philip Jirachi III? So yes, of course all these Jirachis are fucking related. And then it says here, photo number 26 was Lenny Frank in a Hawaiian sarong, lei, and sandals, and he was arrested with Philip Geraci also. And it says fourth is Lee in a cape and sequin toga. Okay, this is like the photograph. This is a photograph that they have that they're examining the people in. And then fifth, I've seen him, but I can't recall his name. I think he's a hairdresser. Sixth, I can't recall his name. He lives now on 1023 or in the vicinity of St. Anne. His first name may be Howard. Photo 27A in the first row. Second, I think his name is Chris. He works for the Times-Picayune. Fourth, this fellow looks almost like the Spanish person I'm talking about. And then fifth is Herbie Trosclair. He's a hairdresser and lives on Bourbon, over the Bourbon House. And he was also arrested with Philip Geraci. Ninth, C.M. Davis. These are all people who are still in these pictures that are being shown. Ninth, C.M. Davis, who resides at Chartres and Esplanade. In the back row, fifth is Don somebody, who's a school teacher. Seventh is Tommy Herford, or something like that. It says, also arrested with Philip Geraci. See note by Barcelona. Next page, see Soul Statement, April 7th of 1969. All right, so that's getting way off tangent. These statements by like Soul, S-O-U-L-E, in reference to these Philip Geraci guys. God damn it. I'm going to have to go over this Philip Geraci stuff just to show you guys how irrelevant it really is. It kept coming up because there's three fucking Geracis, all related. The 1, 2, and 3. One junior and the third, right? And the third was associated with Oswald, and the other two were some freaky gay dudes who got arrested at a party. Okay, so like there's some weird shit going on here with these guys, and I promise one day we'll get to it. We have to, because it's just annoying me like a fucking fly in the ointment. Then 11th, Tracy somebody. It says, see Soul Statement, persons arrested with Philip Geraci. So, like, all these motherfucking gay dudes got arrested at a gay party with Philip Geraci. Photo 27B. First is Jojo Landry. He lives right across the street from me. Also arrested with Philip Geraci. Fifth, Claude Dugas, who was also arrested with Philip Geraci. Sixth is Doug Jones. I wonder if that's the same... Yes, Douglas Jones is the guy who, holy shit, Douglas Jones, who owns Jones Printing, who was involved in the printing of those flyers. He lives on Carlton Street, and he has a printing company, and he was fucking arrested with Philip Geraci. Oh my God, did everybody in New Orleans get arrested with Philip Geraci? Then we have another guy in the photo, James Elsey, E-L-S-E-Y. He was arrested with Philip Geraci, and he's an interior designer for New Idea. And eighth is and another person connected with New Idea, which is an interior designer company in New Orleans. Photo number 27 in the back row, Jimmy Schexnader. He was arrested with Philip Geraci. Jesus Christ, everybody in the world was arrested with Philip Geraci. He's a designer for Hemingway's. Also in the picture is somebody named Lenny Frank. Photo 27D, first right end, is called Polly Pontchartrain. Oh shit, a drag queen named Polly Pontchartrain. That's hilarious. But I think his real name is, he can't recall it, he doesn't know it. Next photo has, fourth is Jean-Pierre Schweitzer. He was also arrested with Philip Geraci, and he works at the Nathan Galleries on Louisiana Parkway. And then you have Louis Tucker, and he was arrested with Philip Geraci also. And then the sixth guy, he says he can't recall his name. He lives upstairs from me on Magazine Street. I don't think he knew Oswald because he had just moved in and didn't stay there very long. He moved into the quarter. Photo number 27F. The first one, they said they called him Mousy, but I don't know his real name. No, we don't have any of these photographs, right? These photos don't exist for some reason. Fourth is Weldon. It says, see Weldon arrested also with Philip Geraci, and that's in the Soul Statement. I'll see if I can't track down this Soul Statement at some point. He's a display director for Gus Meyer. And then the fifth person in the photo, he works for, quote, This Week in New Orleans. I know because he's been in the shop many times. I know the name, but I can't recall it. Photo 27F continued in the back row. Fourth, he says, I know he's a friend of Clay Shaw's. If he's not now working at the London shop, he did work there, and he lived on Governor Nichols. Clay, J.B. Donhauer, and this fellow knew each other. And then you have a guy named Joey Barcelona who works for the Permanent Foliage. He works for Permanent Foliage on St. Claude Avenue, and he was also arrested with Philip Geraci. And then a note here says, homosexual party on 22562. See the Soul Statement of April 7th, 1969. Guys, let's see if we can't find these statements. This is a lot of stuff for me to remember, so if you guys can pull these, that'd be great. The Soul, S-O-U-L-E, Statement of April 7th, 1969. And then in the back row, photo number 27G, it says, Carlos, somebody, he's from Cuba and lives on barracks with Otto Sturl. Oh, I wonder if Otto Sturl is the Nazi guy that we were referred to. It says, note frequent reference to Carlos in other memos. See Carlos Rodriguez, who was arrested with Geraci. Okay, so Carlos is probably Carlos Rodriguez, who was also arrested with Philip Geraci doing gay shit. And then 7th, David Bailey. He lives on St. Peter Street, and he was also arrested with fucking Philip Geraci. See Barcelona above. God damn, they arrested a whole lot of fucking dudes at one time. It says here, Steele also was arrested with Philip Geraci. See Soul Report. So yeah, I got to get the Soul Statement to see everything that happened. The statement was taken in 1969, which was after all the... Let me see, that was before the HSCA stuff, but it was after the Clay Shaw trial. Huh, interesting. It's just a weird time for a statement like that to arise for the first time, because there was really nothing pending reference legal action at that time. Photo 27H, this person I've seen, but I don't know his name. It says the articles, such as a cape and a piece of chain that were taken from Shaw's apartment, were Shaw's Mardi Gras costume that he's worn for the past couple of years. It says, I don't know, I've never seen or been introduced to Ferry. And it says, I don't know Leighton Martins, but I saw him in the neighborhood of the 4900 block of Magazine Street, and that's the block Oswald lived on. He said that he was of the opinion that his father rented a room across the street, and I was of the opinion that he, Martins, visited his father. This was at the time that I lived on Magazine Street. The last time I recall seeing Clay Shaw was 2 Sundays before Mardi Gras, 1967, and we happened to bump into each other on Royal Street and stood together and watched a parade for a time. At that time, I did invite him to the annual buffet I give the Sunday before Mardi Gras, but he didn't attend this year. Before 1963, did you attend any parties at Clay Shaw's? No. He also lived on Dauphine Street, then about the 500 block. I don't think I was in his apartment before 1301 Dauphine. From me reading the newspapers and reading the names of persons involved in the probe, do you recall knowing any of these people? And he says, I thought I recognized him, Leighton Martins, as being a person I recognized on Magazine Street, but any other names have no familiar ring. He says, if need be, will you be willing to take a lie detector? And he says, yes, signed David F. Gentry. So the reason this is in the Arcacha file is because there was the Hispanic man who Garrison believed was Arcacha at Clay Shaw's apartment in 1966, but it really becomes irrelevant, and it turns out not to have been him anyway. That's why that document was lumped in here. Here we have some duplication. We have another statement, the same statement of Jules Rico Kimball. We can skip over that. We've already covered it. Okay, so here now we have a newspaper article. Possibly 2. This one here has a handwritten note. The article's title is Shaw Visited Here in November of 1963. And the handwritten note above it says, from Portland, Oregon Papers, note 2 Oregon addresses given by F. Lee Chrisman in his home address. I see what Garrison's getting at here. All right. So let me clue you in on what's going on. Let me go ahead and read this first, and then I'll clue you in on what I'm thinking. Okay, so Shaw visited here in November 1963. We're talking about this from a Portland, Oregon paper. Clay Shaw, the New Orleans business leader arrested in Louisiana City for allegedly conspiracy to murder President Kennedy, was tied in with a Portland appearance the same month the president was assassinated. He was scheduled as one of the principal speakers at the 5th Annual Columbia Basin Import-Export Conference on November 25th, 1963, describing activities of the International Trade Mart in New Orleans. The conference was canceled because of the president's murder in Dallas, Texas. The president's funeral was being held on November 25th. But Shaw showed up in town for the conference anyway. The Columbia Basin people couldn't locate Shaw to notify him of the cancellation. At some point when we get to Clay Shaw, we're going to go really deep into this. But Clay Shaw was on a train, allegedly, to Portland, riding up the Pacific coast at the time of the assassination. But we know that's not true because we know that he was in Dallas. And that he probably got shuttled around somewhere, possibly to Alexandria after the assassination, possibly, where he most likely caught a flight, not a commercial flight, but a private flight from Alexandria to somewhere that would have allowed him to hop on the train to head north to arrive in Portland on the 25th, which is exactly what he did. Now, the details of Shaw's behavior, I have no fucking clue, and I'm going to have to get to that one day. It says here, Shaw travel route on train beginning November, it looks like 13th or 15th, something like that. 13th or 15th, probably 15th, from Portland, Oregon papers. And then the reference here is to F. Lee Chrisman. Remember, because Chrisman is up in that area. And we can definitely pull Chrisman into the loop after the assassination when he runs cover for all these guys. But I haven't been able to really connect him to the assassination prior to the assassination. And so this would be very interesting to me to link Clay Shaw to Fred Lee Chrisman, because remember when Clay Shaw gets arrested in 1969, the first call he makes is to Fred Lee Chrisman, and Fred Lee Chrisman was up in this area in the Pacific Northwest at the same time that Clay Shaw was heading up there. So was he involved with Clay Shaw in any way, shape, or form after the assassination to help him, or I would say before, but we know that that's not the case yet. Here we have another article by James Long, Journal staff writer. It says Shaw Ferry tie viewed doubtful. If Clay L. Shaw conspired with David Ferry to murder President Kennedy, it was a strange alliance. Shaw has a lifelong dread of flying. Ferry was a veteran airline pilot. The odd sidelight on Shaw's personality was brought to light Friday as the Journal obtained information which suggests that Shaw was en route to Portland by train at the time of the assassination. At the records of New Orleans travel agency accurately reflect Shaw's movements between November 15th and November 23rd. The silver-haired foreign trade expert was riding a Southern Pacific passenger train on a leisurely trip to Portland. Mr. Shaw didn't care for airplanes, said Richard Davis on Travel Consultants, Inc., New Orleans, who took care of transportation arrangements frequently for his neighbor in the International Trade Mart building. Richard Davis, we have another Richard Davis here. Is this the same Richard Davis from the No Name Key? Don't know. When Shaw was invited to speak in Portland at the 5th Annual Columbia Basin Import-Export Conference on Monday, November 25th, he asked Davis to arrange the trip for him by rail. Davis said his records show that Shaw was given a reservation on a Southern Pacific passenger train leaving New Orleans November 15th and going to Portland by way of Houston, San Antonio, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. However, we moved our office not long ago, and we something longer have records older than 1964, which would show when a ticket was actually used and how, Davis said. He added that the lost records also would indicate merely that a ticket was used, not who used it. Train and Pullman records are kept for only 6 months. Okay, so they don't have any proof of the trip of Clay Shaw on this train. And these notes here say, handwritten notes in the column say Shaw's travel route, November 15, 63, as requested. And then there's an arrow into the article, and it says Shaw appeared here on November 22nd, 1963 at midday. Bullshit. That's total bullshit. It says that was when he was might have been when he was supposed to. It says Shaw appeared here on November 22nd, 1963 at midday in San Francisco. That is bullshit. What evidence do we have of that? I haven't seen any evidence of that yet. We will get to that when we get to Clay Shaw and his activities in New Orleans or in Dallas that day. Here, then it says, quote, however, we moved our office not long ago and we no longer have those records. Yeah, I already read that. Presumably Shaw was on the train or somewhere en route on Saturday, November 23rd, when officials of the trade conference were trying to reach him to say the conference had been canceled. Shaw checked into Benson Hotel on Monday, November 25th, and left on Tuesday, November 26th. He ran up a bill of $23.70, but made no long-distance telephone calls through the hotel switchboard. Records indicate on Tuesday he addressed a meeting of the Portland Rotary Club, told them how Portland could increase its port commerce, and then it continues on. I don't think I have to read anything else, though, from it. So just remember back to the party, right, that Perry Russo was at. And so Perry Russo said that these guys made a big deal about an alibi and being somewhere that people would have seen you in public, or you would have been assumed to have been in a public place far, far away from the assassination itself. So, David Ferry allegedly at court, and then at Alice Guidros, and then on this big long trip, but none of that was true. And then Clay Shaw, none of this is true either, okay? Clay Shaw was in fucking Dallas. All of them were in Dallas. All of them were in Dallas. So, but his alibi, just like Perry Russo said when he said, Clem said, I know where I'll be. Of course he knew where he would be. He knew he'd be on a fucking train on his way up to Portland. But was he really? No, of course not. Of course not. All right, moving on. So we have a whole bunch of stuff here on Clay Shaw. And the reason this connects to Clay Shaw is because him and Sergio Arcacha were tight. But let me see. I'm going to skip over this. It just has some addresses, has information on the 1962 Rambler that he had. It appears here the title for Clay Shaw's Rambler was dated 2/21/64. So it doesn't look like Clay Shaw had a fucking Rambler prior to the assassination. He got his Rambler after the assassination, is what that looks like. 2/21/64. Remember that date. All right. So some seemingly unrelated documents. This on the top clearly says from the General Walker file. Something dated 3/7/68 from the District Attorney's Office. Robert Walker, State of Louisiana versus Robert Walker. It appears to be a sheet in reference to the theft of a 1961 two-door Chevy valued at $1,000 belonging to Marilyn Tate. Date of offense 3/3/68. I wonder why this is relevant to the case. Okay, so now we have a document here. Reference George Higginbotham. Higginbotham's another one of these guys connected to Kerry Thornley. Says here, former investigator for Guy Bannister, 60 to 61. Only social contact, 62 to 63. At present, Higginbotham has been arraigned on a charge of marijuana possession. His attorney is Gill Jr. G. Ray Gill Jr. The first night he was here, 538 St. Philip, he showed me stats of 3 letters from Bannister to him concerning Bannister's providing him with false credentials and a cover for infiltrating communist groups. His codename was to be Dale. Higginbotham, says that he saw Martin McAuliffe in Bannister's office a few times. His reason for severing ties with Bannister he attributes to a definite nervousness upon seeing crates, obviously of military supplies, in the back room. There were apparently meetings that were also held there. Martin McAuliffe, again, is the professor at LSU who was a friend of Joyce Talley, who introduced him to Kerry Thornley, right, over his book. But then Martin McAuliffe connects Thornley to Guy Bannister, introduces him, right? So Martin McAuliffe is actually got to be a CIA handler. End of fucking story. And it says here, for some time, he said that Bannister and Kent Courtney worked closely. Kent Courtney, he's another one of these right-wing propagandist guys down in New Orleans who Kerry Thornley acknowledges that he had worked for him for some time, distributing and packing envelopes, distributing this propaganda. And then, if I'm not mistaken, Kent Courtney introduced Kerry Thornley to a handful of other people in New Orleans, which tells me that he was just another one of these CIA publication / disinformation funded operations. For some time, he said that Bannister and Kent Courtney worked closely. However, Bannister did not have a good opinion of Courtney, considering him too mercenary and a loose mouth. Higginbotham also says there was quite a bit of radio equipment in the back room. And it says here, Lou Davis was at Bannister's frequently. Rockwell Nazi Party stayed at Mike Slatter's apartment on Royal Street before they were removed to the Plaquemines Parish. And then it says here, George Lincoln Rockwell was at Bannister's office. Something to the other statement. Something, chief. I can't read the fucking rest of that. So you now have George Lincoln Rockwell, who was the head of the American Nazi Party, but that was not a real American Nazi Party. Like, that's a bunch of bullshit, okay? When they got shut down and they were audited by the IRS, it turned out they were funded by the fucking ADL, okay? So I don't want to hear nothing about George Lincoln Rockwell or anything to do with his American Nazi Party. It was a bunch of bullshit. Plus, you can't have a real National Socialist Party in America because we don't have the fucking ethnic ties to the land like the Germans had, right? The Germans had an ethnic tie to the fucking land. We don't have that here in America. So there's no National Socialism for us. A young man named Eddie Porter, who is now on the West Coast, told George he knew Oswald was a hustler on Royal Street. George said Porter did not specify the time, or if he did, George didn't remember. Porter is gay. Higginbotham was kidding Bannister about sharing a building with people passing out leaflets on the street, and Bannister said, "Cool it, one of them is one of mine." I don't really buy statements like that because I don't think Oswald was ever associated with any of those fucking guys except for Kerry Thornley. Higginbotham suggested following up the possibility of a connection between Richard Lochley and Bannister. He said, rumor has it that the FBI arrested Lochley in the Covington area for selling arms to Latin America. But Higginbotham considered it odd that Lochley was never out of business, and business seemed to even improve. He had a publication called the Counterinsurgency Council and was friends with, and then something's fucking redacted. And then something else is redacted long, and then it says Denver, Colorado. It was all literature concerning demolition procedures, guerrilla warfare, army manuals of warfare, textbooks, and instructions of how to organize a fighting group. Says here in the column, apparently Bob Brown, he's talking about Robert Brown, something, god damn it, I can't read that. Panther Pribistone, I can't fucking read that. Much of what George said was difficult to orientate. He would say, you might check this out, or here's a name. And when I asked, he would say, I'd rather not say, and then kept throwing in, this may have no meaning. I'm not sure I have anything that might help, until I was never sure whether this was meant to be bait or not. A lot of things he said he would prefer to discuss in detail only with Jim Garrison. Concerning the camp across the lake, Higginbotham suggests, okay, this is good because we still have not determined if there ever really was a fucking camp. because remember, Jerry Hemming, who would know, said there never was a camp. All right. So concerning the camp across the lake, Higginbotham suggested the following names. Derek Fryer, unsure of spelling. He was a courier for the Nazi Party, lived on St. Charles Avenue in 62, and they now live in the Covington area. Lauren Butler suggested looking for this man who was a friend of Fryer's and was a high official in the Nazi Party. Ray Leahart, or Earhart, E-A-R-H-A-R-T, a bus driver out of Magazine Street, very active in the Nazi Party. Used to place party slogan and posters on the walls of the depot. Higginbotham knows Joe Newborough, of course, but insists he not know Bill Dalzell. When he brought the Lochley material, etc., he did not go into too much detail, probably assuming correctly that I wouldn't understand too much, although he trusts me as much as he does any woman. Whether much of this is significant or not, I can't say, but Higginbotham is not playing games. He is in too much of a bind, and he is willing to cooperate in any way. This is one person Tommy Baumler will go to any lengths for, regardless of the consequences, and the first person Tommy has begged me to help in any way you can. Higginbotham was a pallbearer at Tommy's daddy's funeral. Tommy says, when I was a crippled kid without a friend in the world, George came and played chess with me and was my only friend. Higginbotham has lived at the same Lower Line Street address for about 15 years, is a gun collector, has survived many political changes, and apparently his sexual proclivities tend to young males. He believes the pot found belonged to a young man with whom he is no longer friendly. His attorney is Gill Jr., mentioned previously. He felt that much of his information would not be considered because, in his opinion, Lou Davis was and is a key factor in the submerged activities in this area, and because of redacted, would not follow them to a conclusion. He feels there was more organization locally in respect to a conspiracy than appears so far on the surface, particularly in respect to the acquisition of supplies, training, organization, and leadership. He says it's logical because these things were available. It certainly wouldn't hurt to talk with him. And that's from Barbara Glancy Reed, who is a close associate of Kerry Thornley. Next, it appears that we have another set of interviews. What does this pertain to? I don't know, but we'll find out shortly enough. See, all this is lumped into the Sergio Arcacha file, but a lot of this doesn't seem to have anything to do with Sergio Arcacha, right? Or so it might seem on the surface. Garrison lumped this in with the other Sergio Arcacha files for a reason. What that reason is, I don't know. Well, to make a long story short, I was in the same outfit as Oswald was in Fair Play for Cuba Committee, only apparently he wasn't in it so deep and in a different part of the country. And at the same time, now bear with me because this is a very difficult explanation to my extent. All right, so I think this is a continuation of... This is a continuation of the statement by Jules Rico Kimball, okay? I spent a lot of time on Jules Rico Kimball, so I'm pretty familiar, and so I'm pretty confident that's what this is. And it goes into some of the stuff on Lawrence Howard and some of these other guys, and he was a great guy to be in a position to know a lot of these people. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll continue reading this. My wife gives me a bit of a rough time when I discuss the situation. I think I'll bust her in the eye, to be truthful about it. Anyway, the FBI contacted me when I came back and I blew the whistle for them for a year, and I was still an officer in that outfit in Chicago, Fair Play for Cuba Committee. I appeared in a hearing with the rest of them. Now, I was never a communist, right-winger, or left-winger, or anything, you see. I was merely interested in the revolution, which I hated a little bit. I could fly a little or push an airplane around a little. Now, can I make a more important point? After my time was up there, which was a year, when a hearing was to be held, I was told by the FBI that they wanted more information from me, and that it was they didn't explain or anything, and that it was sort of a letdown. I was going to whistle on my former friends. I thought I was convinced by them that I was doing a proper job, and they kicked me down, so I blew out of there and came to California, and that was in 1961, the day they were holding the hearing. They didn't want me around, apparently, so here in 1962, I joined up with a bunch of anti-Castro people, Cubans, Americans, and others, and then I found my way into circles of the political right, you see, who were very effective in trying to do away with Castro. At least they were talking about it. That's all they did was talk about it. Believe me, I bought the right-wing line of thing, and I am not against them right now, as a matter of fact, except that I found out a lot of things that horrified me. I paddled their line for them because I thought in turn that they were going to help us get rid of Castro. They were anti-communist, anti-Castro, and all that stuff, and I hated Castro because what the communists were doing embarrassed me, made a fool out of me, and wasted all my efforts, so I was going to get even. This was right-wing thing. Was the way to do it, and I swallowed it. I thought it was a great idea. The Americanism, the patriotism, and all that stuff. And time went on, and as I look back, I didn't know it at the time. It was always the anti-cunity bit. He's a dirty communist, and this and that. And I figured it was just a bunch of hogwash, and I'll go along with the people just to get against Castro. And the individuals were donating heavily, you see. Well, the Birch Society was talking against Castro. In other words, Cuba free in 1963 and everything. The individuals were actually doing something about it by donating money to these different organizations, preferably to Hall and Howard got it, and other people got it in New Orleans, Dallas, Florida, and so forth. The money finally got to them in the medicine that came from the doctors. When you say Hall, you mean Lawrence D. Hall. It's his nickname, by the way. His name is Lorenzo, and he's talking about Lauren Hall. And Lawrence Howard is Larry Howard. I'm sure Weisberg knows this. The rest of the country, too, that Larry Howard is a Mexican-American. Lorenzo Hall is a Cuban-American. No, Lorenzo Hall is not a Cuban-American. He's born in Newton, fucking Kansas. The number 3 man was a guy by the name of Guy Gabaldon, a Mexican-American, the one-time big hero they made a movie about called Hell to Eternity. A former Marine, if you recall. I do vaguely. They play it every year on Channel 9. Well, anyway, the point is these people, I find later, were in it long before Weisberg, and all the rest of those people came along writing books, and it bore on my conscience. I informed the proper authorities about my involvements so I wouldn't become pinned down when they finally arrested them for associating with assassinators of President Kennedy. Now, I immediately thought, and I told old lady Oswald, so he had contacted Marguerite Oswald at one point. Now, I immediately thought, and I told old lady Oswald, so, my gosh, woman, your son is doing the same job I was. This was my impression. You don't get wrong impressions when you are in a mess like that. And later on, the evidence came out that he was this and that. So I said, well, apparently those people were the ones that did it. And then I thought they didn't want Kennedy dead, but the right wing was always trying to kill him. Gabaldon said he was going to kill him in 1962 when Kennedy visited Mexico City. He had an office in Mexico City, by the way, running an anti-communist front called Drive Against Communist Aggression. This was Gabaldon. Gabaldon, Howard, Hall, me, and all the rest. He was financed by some big businessmen here, of whom I have the list of names and whom I became very friendly with. Now, I don't know if you are getting this proper or not, but you can ask me questions. He had an office there. He had some friends in Mexican federal police. The FBI of Mexico, who he tried to get to help with this Kennedy deal down there, to shoot Kennedy in Mexico City when he was here on parade there. And I thought, well, this guy was crazy. He's not talking sense, and he didn't really mean that he was going to kill Kennedy. These people, Oswald and whomever they blamed for it, and even if he was involved or not, which I doubt that he was in a way, and at least I think he was thinking on him, just like I was those people up there. They hated Kennedy. You get to it, no Fair Play for Cuba committee say they hated him, but I heard the right wing say they hated him. Them dirty bastards should be dead, goddamn him all, and that sort of thing. When I was on the other side, I believed what they believed in. I didn't believe what the left wing believed. I finally got to believe what they believed. I couldn't follow it. It didn't make sense, but I understood that they called him a communist. Actually, I was against communism, but I wasn't long with them, just to do away with Castro and to aid people that were going against Castro. Okay, now they had this office in Mexico City, this federal police officer, Captain Juan A. Aranda, Aranda, practically had him assassinated, Gabaldon assassinated, for trying to present the problem of killing Kennedy there. He ran him out of Mexico City. He knew what he was up to, in other words. Sure, he told them that he'd been friends for a long time, this anti-communist stuff. Then Gabaldon tried to sell, remembering Gabaldon, Howard, and Hall was one group with a bunch of other people. Oh, of course, I remember. They all associated. I knew this, and I thought it was great. Anyways, he couldn't swallow the whole trap that Kennedy was a communist. Being Mexican, and he wouldn't believe it. He just couldn't see it, so they rounded them all up and threw them out of Mexico City. That was it. They took his furniture that he had in his office and seized him, and no one knows about those things. If Oswald went to Mexico City, he went there. Now here's another shot. Gabaldon and I one day to John Rousselot of the Birch Society and Sam Moreno in their old office down the street from there, the present one, to get $10,000. You might think I'm some kind of damn fool, but I'm not. I want to see these dirty double-crossing finks get what they got coming to them because they continue to be a threat to me. What we believe is true, and obviously it is true as the daylight now showing. I don't care to prove it, and all that garbage when you've got to prove stuff, that doesn't mean anything to me. But you want the information to get out. That's right. I've written all this down, and I'm looking at my briefcase and contains every name and address and everything I ever did. Do you remember that portion that Mr. Weisberg spoke, and he talks about the visit to the Odio apartment? Right. In my organization, sure, certainly I remember that. When I saw that in October 64, I said, my God, they really did it. They've really reached out when Howard and Hall's name appeared. What about William Seymour? Billy Seymour looked a lot like Oswald, and I would say that. How come no one has ever gotten the whereabouts of Gabaldon? You know, the FBI. Now, let me tell you the first thing before the $10,000 bid is finished here. Senator Hoover. Now, you know what I know about the Bureau is this, and you can't blame him. No, I mean, you can't blame him, but for this point, national security was always drummed into our minds, and anytime I open my mouth, they talk about national security. Please don't say anything to me. Now, I agree with the national security, and it is immoral sometimes, but for national security reasons alone, he has done what he has done. He put the lid on this thing, in other words. He put the lid on. He aimed to keep it on there at all costs. He has to, because these people, they're representatives of the people I am discussing now, are so powerful in the United States that they can knock the president off if they want, if he doesn't toe the line. The right wing said this about the communists, but it isn't so. It's the right wing that is really that way. Mr. Hunt and a lot of the big shots that I agreed with, they can do these things and they will, if things don't go right. Now I'm surprised. The right used to cry, we don't have any money, we don't have any power, we don't have this. Why? They have organized the Birch Society and got it financed. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not an enemy of theirs. I read their book right now and their material, and I agree with a great deal of it, but nevertheless, it doesn't make this fellow any less guilty of associating with Gabaldon and a bunch of creeps. The $10,000 Gabaldon said he didn't get when I waited outside the office. He went inside and talked to Rousselot. He said he didn't get it, but they talked for 4 hours. The $10,000 was supposed to go to Mexico City operation, whatever that means. I know when I was invited down there, Gabaldon and I were both flying airplanes. He invited me to co-pilot for him. I never went down. I was afraid to go to Mexico because of the mess I'd been in with Castro, and he got more effective agents. In Mexico? Yes, the $10,000 apparently he didn't get, but I think he did get it. And John Rousselot was supposed to kick back whatever benefits to the Birch Society. That was Gabaldon's work. It didn't ring a bell with me then. Later on, a personal friend of mine was working in a little savings and loan place, and it turns out this very poor fellow, Mr. Rousselot, whom I know quite well, and as I have said many times, he was in cahoots. To many people I have said this, but I never went into an explanation of the whole thing. He made a loan of $19,000 or $24,000 on the 1st of 1963, so you can't say he didn't have $10,000 to do it with. I've got a copy of the loan. When I saw that, it even added up more so. I'm not one given to fear, but I'm just telling you that is the way things are. And when I see all these guys like Mr. Weisberg and Mark Lane, I have talked to him on the phone. He kind of figured out that I was some kind of crackpot, but they are aiming at a thing that I have known for years. And if they really are wanting to do something, let them do this. Let them say these things. Let me get up and say these things, and I'll say them. We'll bring this thing to a head. I'll tell you why exactly Mr. Hoover is covering up. From my point of view, it is having been an undercover fink for them for a year is for national security reasons. I agree with him, but he is still covering up, and that's it. And many another thing has happened in the interim. They're all written down here. I don't know if you recall, I just want to ask if there was a Leopoldo. That could have been his underground name of Lorenzo. That came to Sodia, it says Sodia Audio's apartment, but it's Sylvia Odio. That came to Sylvia Odio's apartment too. I think it was Lorenzo. Leopoldo was working with an underground name. Howard wanted me to run an office here in 1963, before Kennedy was assassinated, to inform the press, make press releases, and collect money, which I didn't do because I was doing other things along right-wing lines to run an office here, to get press release underway, just as they were about to get to happen against Castro. Howard is a warrior. Hall was a political person that made speeches at Birch Society meetings and open meetings, closed meetings, and was very well accepted by them. He made a lot of money. I found out, I said to Gabaldon one day, what is he doing with all this dough? Is he really putting it into the anti-Castro operations? He said every penny of it goes in there, I guarantee you. And I took his word for it at the time because he was sort of the leader of things. And another thing, Gabaldon, when he came back from Mexico, he ran this drive against communist aggression, which was financed from here. I have all the literature on it, remember all the details. He made speeches all around Arizona, Canada, Detroit. He was all around and therefore helped build up the network we had. Everything is ABC. Was there such a network in Dallas too? Well, sure it is in Dallas. It was part of I'm associated with junior members here now. They're inactive, by the way. If there is something going on, at least they are keeping it quiet. They probably suspect me of being a fink, I suppose. But I really think because we were such good friends a while back that there is really nothing popping just now. They work and naturally take advantage of the situation. Right now it is not profitable or possible. Where's Gabaldon now? Oh, he's hiding out in Mexico. See, all those guys took trips quietly. You know, when the FBI can't find they are well hidden. They couldn't find Howard or Hall for a long time. I saw Gabaldon about 6 months ago over in El Monte, a Mexican restaurant here. He and one of his former backers, who was a big wheel in our Freedom Forum, and his name was Ray Fleischman, Fleischman. Now for Ray, in whose opinion, doctors and so forth, we $10,000 worth of medicine for anti-Castro operation in the Mexico City deal. Was there any link between the group and Ruby and his activities in Cuba? I don't even like to talk about that guy because I can't stand anyone. I feel sorry for him and the way he died and so forth, but I knew I knew he would, just like Lane and Mr. Weisberg knew. He was a dirty rat that was in the scheme somewhere. I don't even like to talk about a back shooter, in other words. I got no use for him. He's cheated everyone and helped make the big lie. Obviously, if that woman said he was involved, he probably was involved. I'll discuss it with her if I were researching the situation. Which woman are you referring to? I think Mr. Lane and Mr. Weisberg wrote about some woman who put the finger on Ruby as being the payoff man. Talking about Nancy Perrin Rich. That's who he's talking about. You see, we were all in Cuba at different times. You were there too? Well, sure, just for a short time after the war. There was some government there, but some of the big wheels, any of them that went there were either for or against. They had some deal going with the government, see. They were involved. In other words, they didn't just go there to look around because the peasant armies are marching and people are building and things and really going down there. So you just don't go there to look around. It's not just a good tourist spot. It's revolutionary activity. So Ruby was there, and that convinces me he was involved. Did you ever know anyone by the name of Praskins or Pratkins or anyone by the name of McWillie? I knew those names. They're in the same report that I'm in. Oh, no. I just heard the names. I don't know them. They don't ring a bell. They do ring a bell, but not with my activities. I don't know them at all. I just read about them, and I don't want to bring them in with the reality of what I know. Certainly. Well, it's been very interesting in any case, and I don't know when Harold will be out here again, but I know that he would enjoy meeting you when he does come, and I'm sure that can be arranged. In any case, remember that I called, and that wasn't your home phone, was it? Am I talking to you from there? That's my business and home phone both. It's a little printing business. Well, I'll be in touch with you in any case. I'm very grateful for your call, and that is all I can say. Well, these guys are batting their brains out. I don't know what their angles are. Maybe they are very honest, upstanding, non-political, non-religious people that are really trying to do their job, and I'd like to think that was the case. It doesn't matter what their real motives are. The point is they are fishing around and finding out a whole lot of things, and I don't want to be embroiled in the middle of it when they fish my name out of a hat, if you know what I mean. I'd rather blow the whistle now and get it over with if someone used it than I'm in the clear. You speak of people trying to know how to fly airplanes. You know, it was speculated that a plane did take off or was scheduled to take off at Redbird Field at Dallas the afternoon of the assassination. Oh, I never heard that. Yes, that is in one of the articles by one of the authors of the case. Somebody felt that a plane really did take off from Mexico or one for South American countries. I know Gabaldon flew a lot of miles back and forth. Look, here's a very simple solution. Gabaldon naturally wouldn't be involved directly. He might even be sitting there in an airplane. I don't know. I don't care about that. But where was Billy Seymour that day, to whom I think you know, run upstairs and put Uncle on the spot? I really think that. He was just a dirty little rat like some of these people who are trying to make a name for themselves, these big movie heroes. Did these people have expertise, firearms, and weapons? Well, yes. I learned stuff myself, and they had people who wrote manuals by hand and passed them around to the Greeks that were training on No Name Key. That's the name of the key. It's No Name. There was also a place near New Orleans. They had expertise there. There was a local guy training them there, a Canadian, and Howard and several others. What they wanted from us was medicine. If you've got a wound, they want to throw a powder on it. What kind of powder is it? I forget. And aspirin and stuff like that in case they were wounded, you see. So they knew all the fundamentals of killing and wounding. They knew all the fundamentals in a raid. I would say that Howard was an expert because he sure taught an awful lot of men in the army, Castro. I don't give a hoot about any of those people anymore. I think they've used me up. I don't want to be around when the axe falls, and at the same time, I don't want to see it. At the same time, I want to see it fall. You want to get your information out there while you have the chance. Right, and these birds, which I definitely imagine was the case, were involved. Whether Oswald was or not doesn't matter. I still think he was doing the same job I was doing. Before I even read a word of it, I knew it. That Oswald was down here. I'm the one brought his old lady on the Joe Pine show. Did you see that? No, I didn't. I heard that she was here, though. That was in 1965. I appeared down there and I told briefly what I was involved in. I said, I got the impression your son was doing the same thing I was. They shut me up and I thought the Federal Bureau would never speak to me again because they told me to shut my trap, see? Tell me where I can reach you at this number. When's the best time to call? Or do you want to leave it just as where you can reach me? Well, that'd be sensible just to have it that way. All right, whatever you like, but this is a good time to call me. Early in the morning, I will transfer some of this to Harold. If you like, talking about Harold Weisberg, at least I will give him a report on the facts as they are. And then he goes, what do you think of General Walker? I mean, you say you know Walker. Do you think it's true that he might be involved? First of all, you know that Oswald was to have taken a shot at General Walker. I don't believe it. I think Howard took a shot. Oh, you think Howard took a shot? Certainly. He was in Dallas with all those other crumbs. I don't believe Oswald did it. I don't care, you see. I don't want to try to prove anything. I'm just trying to tell you who did what and why. Well, Oswald was supposedly had someone with him. There were perhaps two people involved. Like Billy Seymour and Howard, who was always hauling his big Mexican carcass around trying to pull some kind of caper. Oswald was a fink, just like I was, a fink for the feds. Let's face it, we did things that were completely opposed. We committed treason for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You know what I mean. The things we blame the committee for doing, we did. We led them. We organized them. We would do things that would put us in such a light, such a position, and would even go and take a shot at someone if we had to, if that was part of us getting us to infiltrate some organization. There it is. It is horrible but true. And then it was very likely that Oswald did it intending to infiltrate, never intending to hit. It is something that bears investigation and possible. The very cover-up of the situation, obliterations here and there kind of things, indicate some more things involved, which I'm glad to see people investigate it. Do you think it's conceivable when Oswald went to Mexico City that he was endeavoring to see Gabaldon, or was Gabaldon there at the time? Exactly what I'm thinking. Look at Billy Seymour. And another thing, Gabaldon told me that hit me pretty hard, and I hated his guts for it. Not hate him, wouldn't burn his house down, but I hated him because he later said, on before Kennedy died, I know a guy that looks just like you. Now here's me, a picture of me. I'm going around wearing a Texas hat. I got a rifle, and I go out and shoot all the time, and Gabaldon knows this. I'm a chewing tobacco Texas hat wearing gunman. You get it? He's got the picture of me like I'm some kind of big fat fool. He's telling me I know a guy looks exactly like you, and I said, poor son of a bitch, and so forth. But he told me this several times, and that gave me the impression he was trying to tell me something. Then later on, I realized, by God, it could have been another one of these Billy Seymour deals, trying to get me with my own reputation as an NRA member and a shooter, and get me involved in all this deal. So this ain't from what somebody else investigated. This is from what I realized later on, and it worried me plenty. Anyway, it's a long, miserable situation, and with both people it was hate that drove them forward, and suppose with a little money too, but more and more actual hate than money. I think it's obvious. I think I'd better hit the trail unless I'm holding you up here. I appreciate it. In any case, we'll be in touch. Good show. Thank you so much. And that's wraps up this statement from Jules Rico Kimball. Now, recall, this is in the Sergio Arcacha file. Doesn't really seem to have much to do with Sergio Arcacha, does it? But it's some good information nonetheless. And it is in this Sergio Arcacha PDF. So we're on page 51 out of 90. We'll continue this on Monday. Thanks, guys.